All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody, into another edition. This is Cross Functionality, the show connecting coaching, baseball, softball, male, female, hosted by former college baseball and softball players. You know the deal by now. Episode 59 today. Thank you for joining us. Let me bring in my friend and co-host, softball national champion at the University of Alabama and current day renowned coach, Cassie Reilly-Boccia, entering a very busy off-season as we go into November and December, January, and the winter months there in the Northeast.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. We have all of our pro baseball players home right now. They're starting their training. High school fall ball is finishing up. So anybody who played a fall sport is now entering into a lot of baseball, softball training. So just exciting times for us.
Last week, we had a pretty good episode last week, episode 58. Go back in the archives and listen to that show talking about becoming a fearless athlete. The one thing we didn't bring up, and I want to bring it up here before we get into today's topic, talking about overcoming athlete overthinking and trying to prevent athletes from doing such. Episode 58 last week, talking about becoming a fearless athlete. How do you become a fearless hitter? That's something we didn't touch on last week, and I think the one element of becoming a fearless hitter is by sticking with the plan that you had going into the game, going into the box, and not deviating from that plan. Just my 2 cents, but I think that's the best way to become that fearless type hitter, in essence, becoming a fearless athlete.
Yeah, and I'm going to add probably a different layer to it, and something that I think females tend to not realize is how impactful is just your presence. So you're going to have a tendency to have a male athlete be able to, not all the time, but for the most part, they're going to be able to fake looking that part, looking intense, looking the confident one. And females tend to wear their emotions on the outside just a little bit more, just tend to be a little bit more emotional. And I don't think most of my girls don't realize how empowering it is to, well, what would a fearless athlete look like right now? What would a fearless hitter look like right now? And start to act the part. And then all of a sudden, one impacts the next, right? Your body language, your presence is now going to impact how calm you can keep your brain. And that kind of leads into what we're doing today with the overthinking. But when you can keep your brain calm, when you can keep your body present, then all of a sudden the ability to stick to the plan is very easy at that point, and you can do all those things. But certainly that presence screams volumes to not only the people around you but yourself as well.
Yeah, I do wonder, connecting to today's topic of overthinking, I do wonder how much sticking with the plan or lack thereof contributes to that overthinking, and even in game. Forget about pregame, but in game.
I can tell you firsthand, the first time I started trying to stick to a plan, my coach in high school, I was a sophomore, and they were like, listen, the plate's in thirds, just pretend the plate's in thirds, and we're gonna stick to 2/3 of the plate at a time. So get up there. She's throwing lefties outside for strikes. That's the one you want to hit. Just get rid of that middle third part of the plate. And my first pitch was a pitch right on the inside third of the plate. And I was like, oh man, it took everything I had to be like, this is wrong, this is bad, I'm not supposed to be doing this. It was just, because it feels so obtuse sometimes when you're used to just going up there and crushing. But I'll tell you what, I could 100% see one leading to the next. You're an overthinker. It's going to be very difficult to break that habit and trust the plan.
Yeah, there's so many elements to today's episode 59, talking about athletes overcoming that overthinking part of their game. We'll come up with a better title in post-production, of course, but that's our main topic today. Be sure to follow us on social media at Jim Tara on both Instagram and Twitter, and at Coach Cassie RB on Twitter, at Coach_CassieRB on Instagram. If you have any questions, email us jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. Again, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. Episode 59 today, overcoming athletes overthinking. And talking about, you talk a lot about the state of flow and your mindset. Let's discuss the mindset, though, that an athlete needs to get into so they don't overthink. We just kind of touched on it there briefly when it comes to becoming a fearless hitter, sticking with the plan. But what about an athlete's mindset, and how much does that contribute to getting away from an athlete overthinking?
Sure. And it's funny, when I thought of this topic, I thought of the athletes I played with, and I thought of myself. I thought of the athletes I'm coaching, and it almost seems like there is a dial, right? I could be on completely one end of the spectrum here. I could be completely on the other end of the spectrum. So we're trying to find out where this happy medium exists, where you could be an athlete that goes up to the plate and it's just like, not present at all. They're out to lunch. They have a hard time focusing. That's they are not overthinking, but they're not even thinking, period. They're, and there is a element to that of like, you want to go up there and clear your mind, but we don't want to be completely lost in something else, or distracted really. And then we have the hyper overthinker who is thinking about every single thing their parents said, every single thing their coach said. They're overthinking what the pitcher might throw. Is she going to do this? Or he going to throw here? Whatever it may be. Should I be standing here? Should I have my feet here? We're trying to find that happy medium, right? So when we talk about a state of flow, we're trying to talk about where does that middle ground exist where we can still take elements of having our plan incorporated into what we're doing, but still have this natural, easy athletic flow about us. You really can't be overthinking and trusting that natural athleticism at the same time. The two are going to conflict with each other for sure.
So you mentioned in there briefly about how your high school coach told you to stick with the plan when it came to splitting the plate up in thirds. Mm-hmm. So that was, I think that's a great method if you're overthinking at the plate, at least mentally. Not thinking about overthinking maybe about your plan, not so much about mechanics, although that type of plan could get you away from thinking about mechanics. But how do you apply something like that example right there, to other parts of your game when you are overthinking, not just hitting, but just overall in general?
Yeah, I think it's got to start in practice, because there's going to be different methods to getting an overthinker to come out of that. And you know, really what this overthinker is doing, and I'm going to try to remember a quote that I think really applies to this. It's someone saying, you're afraid to surrender because you don't want to lose control, but you never really had control. All you ever had was anxiety. And so I think overthinkers are in this boat where they're like, hey, I feel like if I'm overthinking, I'm controlling the situation, when in actuality, there's this lack of trust in the process, the lack of trust and confidence that is leading to that overthinking. So as coaches, we need to recognize that's why this is happening, and then try to figure out different avenues for them to trust instead. My coach split the play up into thirds and was like, hey, maybe this is an avenue that works for Cassie. When you work with athletes, you're going to see there's going to be different avenues that you can kind of get them away from overthinking to trust something else instead. But I think that is not a light switch. It's not something you can just be like, hey, stop thinking. Just go up there and hit. It's like, great. That's great advice. But it's a lot of times because they are just dying to hold on to that control, we need to give them something else to trust and grasp onto.
Yeah, that's more abstract advice than concrete advice.
Yeah, and it's not wrong. It's not ill-intended. It just might not be effective, especially for a hitter who's maybe over analytical about certain things. And you know what? When I say bring it up in practice too, I really didn't give too many concrete examples, but when you're in practice, and I really try to, if I get a hitter who has a tendency to lean towards overthinking, I'm going to try to entice her that way or entice him that way just a little bit, because I want to see, are they aware of what direction they're heading towards? Are they able to get themselves out? And am I able to say something or do something that helps them come out of it? And if we can, we hyper focus on that. Like, okay, maybe the thirds didn't work. I've actually physically taken a plate and cut it into thirds and tried that with hitters. I've also taken different size plates. Something as simple as just taking a spare piece of carpet we had downstairs and cutting different size plates. And I say, okay, listen, 2-0-3-1 first pitch, your plate is a little smaller. 2-strike approach, your plate is now a little bit bigger. Just trying different visualization aspects again for them to try to trust and hold on to, instead of trying to grasp onto their overthinking or their overanalyzing of what's going on.
Yeah, and we're talking today about athletes overcoming overthinking. So again, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts on the audio side, YouTube, the Softball Strength Academy YouTube page. Be sure to subscribe to that as well for full episodes and clips. New episodes, of course, every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, let's discuss where overthinking sort of comes from and where it stems from. We're talking about athletes and overthinking. How about their anxieties? How about the pressure? It could be internal and external, of course. Lack of confidence, lack of awareness. But let's first start. I think the first one probably is the most important one, where it starts with the anxieties. And I think that probably anxieties and the pressures that athlete might be facing tie in with one another. And that's how the overthinking really, really begins.
For sure. Interestingly enough, I've talked about the Whoop band a lot.
Yep.
So the Whoop band is measuring your heart rate. It's taking a lot of interesting information, and it's able to output it in a really smart way so that you can understand what's going on. But we have certain professional athletes. These are guys playing for the Nationals at the major league level, playing for the Dodgers, playing for any team you're talking about. We're looking at their WHOOP statistics, and we're looking at what their stress is, just their baseline stress on a normal day, and it is high. They are operating at this very, very high level when they are leading into games, because they are having such a hard time calming themselves down, not overthinking. It's not until right when they get on the mound, they have implemented their strategies, they've implemented their pregame routine, whatever, that they can calm down. So I guess I say that with, these are not abnormal things. The best of the best still deal with anxieties and still deal with these pressures. They have just figured out ways to calm it down for when it matters the most. But anxiety can come from a lot of different ways, or a lot of different places. Pressure can come from a lot of different places. You might be cruising fine in practice, and then all of a sudden someone turns the camera on, or someone starts filming because they're going to post to, hey, dad's going to videotape you so you can post to your Twitter to show you how well you're doing. And now all of a sudden 3 in a row aren't hit as well, or they look different. So, I think I think we just need to recognize that they're going to be very situational specific. It's not always task specific. You could be doing the same drill in one scenario, and then someone else is watching and it's very different now. But those are going to impact the athlete so much. And just being aware of that, I think, as coaches, as parents, as people who are in leadership positions for our athletes, we can really start to try to recognize and then help the athlete work through those.
Yeah. What body language signs do you notice, though, in athletes when you're working with them, that they're really overthinking? Some of them are right there in front of you, and you can tell right off the bat that they're overthinking, but in other times, maybe not so much. So what are some signs that you may look for as a coach when an athlete's overthinking?
Sure. I'll stick with the hitter example first. But watching them in their stance is paramount. So like their cadence might not look as rhythmical, and all of a sudden their cadence looks a little faster or a little bit more jerky, or their step is a little harsher. So I'm watching them rep to rep, and that's it. It starts to speed up and it starts to look rushed. The time in between their reps also starts to look rushed, because now I screwed up. Instead of being like, all right, so what? On to the next one, nice and smooth back up the middle. They're thinking, oh my gosh, why didn't that work? It's their thoughts have now started to speed up a little bit. Their eye focus. I know this sounds silly, but like if you've ever done a really, really difficult cardio workout, let's say, and you start to get to the end where you start to get stressed, like let's say you're cruising on a treadmill, or you're doing something, you're on a run, as you're breathing and your heart rate starts to increase, your eyes will start to not be focused. They're not calm anymore. They're starting to look around. They're starting to be like, that's just a natural reaction to when our heart rate rises and when we're starting to feel stressed like that. So you'll start to see a hitter, again, instead of that calm focus, they're looking around third base, shortstop, pitcher. This, like, they're just not, that their focus of their eyes is darting a little bit more. And then you'll see some athletes hold it all on their shoulders. They have this stiffness to them. It doesn't look like a relaxed flow anymore of movement. It looks very herky-jerky. So those are typical ones. But I think you're going to, those are the obvious ones. I think athletes that start to act different. So if you have a quieter athlete that all of a sudden maybe starts to talk a little bit more, or starts to try to justify, hey, oh, I did this. Like, give me the next one, I'll fix it. Oh, I did this. Their dialogue is kind of, their anxiety is coming out of them in verbiage. You have some athletes who typically have relaxed conversations that all of a sudden get really quiet. And so it's going to come out in different ways, but those are a lot of the main ways I've noticed becoming very obvious that athletes are experiencing some type of pressure or anxiety right away.
And how do you fix that? How do you go about, as a coach, just nipping it right there in the bud?
Yeah. So probably easier said than done. I like to observe a little bit because, again, I don't want to rescue the athlete right away. And this depends too. I've had athletes who are cruising and they're younger, and then all of a sudden they tense up and almost look fearful. And I realize it's because a parent has now started watching. That might be a very different, sometimes I try to address that and bring that up and be like, hey, you look tense all of a sudden. Why do you think that happened? So sometimes you have to be a little bit more, I guess, careful or tread carefully, because you don't want to be like, hey, did your dad yell at you at home? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
But I try to say, like, do you feel different right now? And they have to take a step back and almost think, I don't know, do I? Because they're young, they're learning to manage all these emotions, and they might not even realize until after the fact, like, wait a second, I was calm and then I wasn't, and they don't remember the middle of how they got there. So I try to just, back up a little bit. I want the athlete to talk. I don't want to go in and rescue them and be like, hey, your traps look like they're in your ears. Your breathing looks shallow. Like, I want to just ask them, how are you feeling? What are you feeling? Oh, you know what? My grip feels really tight. Because if they came up with it, they're going to remember and be able to recognize it next time they're in a game. When they start to tighten up their grip, they're like, oh, I need to relax that. Where if I just told them, again, it's very similar to when you do drills, it's not going to stick for them as much.
Right. Yeah. And we're going to talk here about dealing with overthinking too for coaches, for parents. I think coaches have a better understanding of what the athlete may be going through overthinking wise, because they can kind of look at that body language and see, at least the qualified ones, right? They can look at that body language and notice that the athlete is overthinking. How do coaches, by the way, how do they change their tone, and how do they change their style of coaching, or at least adjust it at that point for the athlete who might be overthinking at that and in that lesson or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I think this is a situation where it's a lot easier in a one-on-one setting, but when you're in a little bit of a group setting, one, you don't want to call the athlete out and make it even worse for them. But
Of course.
you do want to try to find some type of one-on-one opportunity, I think, in that group setting where you're taking the side and you do start talking to them. And again, I try to give a lot of visuals, but perhaps like you have to maybe test out, hey, are you feeling like this? Hey, is your mind feeling like it's a little out of control? Are you feeling extra tense? Whatever it may be, you can start to create some of these visuals for the athlete or descriptions for the athlete to identify with and be like, okay, yeah, maybe I am feeling a little bit that way. But I think once you recognize that in an athlete, it's helping them become aware of it, and then helping provide them tools to say, okay, the next time we start to feel our breathing shallow, I want you to take a second, pause, take a step back off the drill, and take a rep off, take a set off. Like, they'll just keep going through your set. They'll just keep getting off the tee, and give them something to reset. Because I think the reset really helps athletes not spiral, right? Because overthinking is truly just it's like you're tumbling down a mountain. So if you can get them off the mountain for a second and then restart, that sometimes helps. If you see like they're not able to do that, I think that's when you sometimes need to shut a drill down physically, right? We're perception of someone from the outside is, well, they're not getting all their reps in. Yeah, but those weren't effective reps. We don't want to reinforce those reps with our minds spiraling like that.
Right. Quality over quantity.
For sure.
Right. Wasn't it Albert Pujols that said that about hitting? I may have brought this up before in previous episodes, where you'd rather take 100 good swings and 400 bad swings. Right. Ted Williams,
I believe it. Yeah.
Ted Williams used to take like 800 swings till his hands would bleed. But I guess he knew the difference between quality and quantity. He was the best hitter of all time, arguably.
Maybe that helped him stop overthinking. Maybe it wasn't until he got to like 700 that he'd stop thinking, because he was so tired, and then he got really good, 100 really good quality reps.
That could have been it too. Yeah, with blood coming down his hands. Ooh. Have you ever had that, by the way, where maybe you haven't hit in a while, and then you start hitting again or whatever, and your hands, you start to get, I get a cut always, and this is more of a visual, but I always get the cut right on my pinky right there. And it goes between my pinky and my ring finger, and it's like right there.
I used to get mine at the bottom. Yeah, the bottom right here.
Yeah.
We had construction going on at Alabama one time, and all of our hitting equipment were in these big storage units, these like big metal storage units, and it's 100 and something degrees in Alabama, and I wasn't thinking, and I went over and I grabbed onto the handle to open it, and I actually burnt my hand, and I was like, "Whoa, that was hot." Anyway, it wasn't too bad. It was no big deal, but I put batting gloves on that day because my hands were a little sore from it. But that was the one day I bled hitting, because my hands must have gotten that soft from grabbing onto the handle.
Sure. Did you wear batting gloves when you hit in general? Or did you?
I usually did. And I remember I didn't want to. I was like 15 or 16 before I finally conceded to it, because my hands would bleed during batting practice when I was younger. But I thought Jorge Posada was so cool not wearing batting gloves, and I wanted to be the hitter that didn't wear batting gloves. And then when we got to Alabama, we got some really cool batting gloves that I was like, all right, I can
Right.
love batting gloves.
You
They're
you
really
can't pass
cool.
up that great equipment. By the way, I'm looking at Pat Murphy's story the other
Mhm,
day, the sunrise with at the stadium
mhm.
with fall ball and everything. I'm like looking down, like that's just beautiful. That's
It
just
is.
glorious. Do you ever do you ever look at that, or look at his story, or something like that, something very similar to that, and kind of wait? Just does the memories and the nostalgia start just come in for you and just flood your mind? It has to, right? Because
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know if I'll ever. I hope I never lose that. I,
Right.
and it's one of those things. I don't think I'd want to go back in time and leave my life I'm at now. But even if it was like an hour to just go back and sunsets at that stadium were awesome, sunrises at that stadium were awesome. But yeah, it's like the movies, right? You sit there and you feel like you can start to visualize all the amazing moments you've had at that field. So for sure.
I don't know if I was if it were me and I have a photographic memory. I can remember sights, sounds, smells attached to
Mhm.
memories from years and years ago. And I'm looking at that, and I see, if I was in your shoes and I see that, all that memory, all of those memories that I had would just flood right back into my mind. And
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure I would, I don't want to say overthink, because that is the title of today's episode, but I would think for like an hour or like an hour and a half, just replaying those memories with every vivid detail.
Sometimes like my drive home, I'll hear a song that used to play at the stadium and
Yeah.
I'll go into like a daydream mode
Yeah.
of what playing there and even practicing. I love practice. I know some people don't love practicing, but that I don't know, we got to practice out that stadium. That's it's
Yeah.
amazing. I love that.
Yeah. Just
But
your mind
even
goes.
yeah, we talked about the documentary that coming out in the spring.
Yeah.
And they were doing the documentary on the softball team, and we were all getting interviewed 10 years after we won the national championship. But even just whether that's a really good job on the documentary guys who are doing the interviewing or just being back in that environment, feeling every emotion from 10 years ago all over again, I think we all experienced that. So that is, I totally resonate with that for sure.
So, did the grass? I'm not too familiar with the Alabama climate in the fall. Did the grass have that morning mist on it, or was that
Uh,
more? It's more with Northeast.
no, I think sometimes
Okay.
because Alabama is hot in the South, but it still experiences some seasonality. Like, like December and January are not super warm. Like
Mhm.
you're going to have like maybe you'll have the occasional like 70-degree day in December or January, but it's not Florida, I guess. So
Right. Right. Right.
you still have some seasonality. It's just, it's like a 6-week winter
So,
instead of a 6-month winter.
I'm just curious. Take me through. Now we're going back in time here with memories. Just take me through, for you, like Saturday, for example, or when did you guys have fall ball? When would you guys? It would be Saturdays and Sundays, right?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah. So what would be like a typical Saturday morning for you for fall ball?
Mhm.
And then get into the stadium and just kind of that all day type event, practicing and training in general.
So like, let's say we were playing or just practicing.
Both, doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess funny enough, so if it was a Saturdays are in Alabama are a big college football day.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
practice would usually be scheduled around game times. But
Yeah.
what I used to love is, so let's say it was a practice. We had the parking lot that we would park in for the softball stadium was the same parking lot that all the RVs would line up for college football.
Mhm.
So you'd be pulling in and you'd be seeing people, they'd be like, usually if someone's a fan of Alabama football, it's an Alabama fan. So you'd see all these football fans, sometimes they'd start clapping for you. They'd say like, hey, have a good game, have a good practice, whatever it was. So it was a very different experience than what you get
Right.
in the spring because you get all these football fans. But yeah, just get into the stadium early. I don't know. I loved walking up to the field, seeing the empty field, seeing them doing some work on the field. The air smells a little different. It's not as humid, so it's like a little bit of a crisper air
Right.
for
That
sure. The
fall
sun works
air.
a little
Right.
different. Yeah. Um, but gosh, just like walking in, saying hi to everybody who was already there, starting some type of pregame stretch or pre-practice stretch with my trainer, making sure I got my journaling in at and just being there and seeing everyone else walk in and seeing how I don't know, it's not like work. You go to work, not everyone's walking in happy to be there. But when you're playing with these guys, everyone's just really excited to be there. Everyone wants to be. There's nowhere else they want to be. Imagine 25 people showing up at the same place, and the only place they want to be is there.
Right.
That's so rare. How often do you get that? You get that with maybe weddings and special occasions now, but
maybe
you got it almost every right. Right. Not everyone wants to be there. For the most part, your family does, right? They're like, for the most part, they're happy that, for the people there, but 25 people, nowhere else they'd rather be. So that's rare.
But where did you get breakfast?
Oh, I would usually eat that at my house.
Okay, so you would have breakfast at your house. When would you journal?
I would, before, if it was a game, I would do it at my house beforehand. I'd watch my series of videos. I'd have like a couple of Michael Jordan commercials, a couple of different videos that I like to watch. Okay. And then I'd journal anything I was feeling. I journal my game plan for the day. That journaling session before games was a little bit longer, so I'd keep that. I'd do that at home, and then I'd head to the field. If it was a practice, most of the time I'm coming from class, or the journaling session wasn't as long, so I would do my journaling at my locker. And it was, how are you feeling today? So it was like a quick gut check of how I was feeling, my physical goal, my mental goal for the day, just assessing my confidence, and that would be the pre-journaling. And then I had right below that my post-practice journaling, where it was, how'd I do sticking to my physical goal? How'd I do with my mental goal? And what do I want to work on for my next practice?
Okay, so then you would journal at your house, and then you would go over to the field, go into the clubhouse, locker room, whatever you want to call it, get changed, get ready to go. Any rituals in the clubhouse, in the locker room?
No, I think just sticking to, I liked getting there very, very early. I like taking, and I never wanted to feel rushed with it. But I think I did have like little note cards there. If there was less of journaling, more reminders, like little quotes that I used to like to look at. Good reminders. But nothing too crazy ritual wise at the field. I used to write your best on my wrist before every game, because I don't know, it was just very comforting to know that I couldn't do anything more than that. And I was just very confident I would never give anything less. So that was my calming word. And then I brought my stuff out into the dugout, got my turfs on, and then we would usually warm up, hit, come out onto the field, do some light defense. And then, you got to take your practice jersey off and put your actual uniform on, which was always, felt like that needed a moment. That should have never been rushed.
So then you would go back to the clubhouse, put on your uniform. And then did you have any specific warm-ups that you did personally, physically, mentally, after you got outside the clubhouse to the field to get you ready for that practice for that game?
No, if I was doing anything personally, it would have been done beforehand. So like once we started as a team, it was everything with the team. But yeah.
I'm glad we went through this exercise because it ties in with overthinking. If you don't have a routine, here's my point to all of this. If you don't have a routine like you did or your teammates did, you're going to ultimately suffer and overthink a lot of things, right? It's having that foundation for being successful. And you get any good, this, you get good at anything, and you learn something. You learn the most important points of that certain thing that you want to do really well, and that's how you get good at it, because now you can kind of continue to build off that foundation. I think that when athletes overthink, it's because they don't have a proper routine, as you did when you were playing, and it led to an abundance amount of success both on and off the field for you, because you had a routine, and you stuck by that routine, and you never deviated, which is admirable. Sometimes when things aren't going well, a lot of athletes will deviate from that, but you didn't. So you just kind of outlined there everything you did with that routine that helped you maybe not overthink.
Yeah, I think you can kind of, what you want to visualize it as, these are your guardrails that you're protecting your thinking, or you're protecting your focus. Yeah. And so when there are going to be times where it feels very easy to stick with this because things are going well. And then there's going to be times where it does not feel easy to stick with this, where you feel like maybe things are not working. That doesn't mean you can't audit what you're doing and talk to people and maybe make some adjustments, and maybe you change up what you're journaling. But all of this, is just, it's, people think guardrails are going to like constrict you. The greatest example I heard about what discipline and routine does for you is, if a grandma has her grandchildren over and she has this yard, but she lives on a really, really busy road and there's no fence, she's not going to let her kids outside. But if she has a fence, then she can let them go right to the fence. And now, so with those guardrails that she just put in place with that fence, all of a sudden you've just opened up the entire yard of accessibility, right? And so people think like, oh, this is too much, or thinking too much about the game. No, really, I'm providing all the space so that maybe with those guardrails and that discipline and that routine, I don't feel like I have to grasp onto overthinking. I can release my clench on overthinking because, well, no, I've already taken care of the thinking. I've already taken care of what I needed to do, and now I can just flow. And I think what that leads to is a great visual too, is a river versus a flood. Both is water, both is super powerful, but one creates a ton of damage with no guardrails, and the other one, we can really utilize.
Well, you said it right there, and to illustrate your point even further, it's about simplifying the mind, and your routine, what you were doing, it simplified your mind to the best that it was for you, individually as the athlete, individually as the player, and it led to success.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful I had really good coaches in my life that helped me set those up. But then also, even when I got to Alabama, it was sports psychologists that helped with adding some visualization and meditation, which we've talked about. Hey, maybe look into journaling about this post game, and it's setting up what works best for you, for sure.
So next week, do we hit on every point today?
Right? I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure.
Good.
Make sure.
I hope it was helpful. I would have been helped by this as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old coming up.
Sure. Yeah. Even coaches could be helped by this too. Next week, talking about episode 60, decision-making fatigue. Apparently we make 35,000 decisions a day. Is that really accurate?
I've heard something less than that, and I've heard something like almost twice as that, but that was at least cited in a study. I don't know how they came up with it, but I think it's impressive. I can see it happening.
You could think about it, what you might eat for lunch. For example, you using your shaker bottle for water, that's a decision.
Right. My decision to just pick this up, right, and drink it. Decision to speak right now. Yeah.
Coffee, right? I left my water downstairs. That was a decision, albeit an accident. So I can see how the 35,000
it adds up.
Right. Really does in the end. Your decision to wake up at a certain time. There you go. We're going to talk about that next week and how it applies to athletes' decision-making fatigue. Episode 60. You got anything coming up that we should know about? Anything on social media?
Nothing crazy. We got more posts. We got more posts coming down the pipeline. As you guys, we talked about emailing jimbopodcast21@gmail.com.
Yep. Very good.
It's right in front of me. Son of a gun. But also,
you and Jake, you guys can't get the email down. I don't get it.
Right. And I should, because you do a great job with the other.
It's okay.
And our name, but
I try to make it as simple as possible. Jimbo Podcast, the date, the number, day of my birth, 21. Then at gmail.com. A billion people use Gmail. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. Just any comment. You can, in addition to emailing, if it's easier for you to comment once you see an Instagram post and have a question, or send us a DM, we'll get all those questions as well. Yeah. Be able to address them on the show as well.
By the way, I don't like the when people say PM rather than DM. It's a direct message. It's not a personal message. Did you notice that? People say, "Oh, send me a PM." I'm not going to send you a PM.
I don't know if I've heard PMs before.
I'll send you a DM. That's more like a Facebook thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I saw a friend on Facebook, or a person I'm friends with on Facebook, said they're selling something, and they said, "Send me a PM."
That might be a Facebook thing. Yeah, I've not heard of that one.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Again, if you have any questions, email us, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. Follow us on social media.